All right, comrades, welcome back. We're here to talk about Nikke level 23, prison. So we start off and we're all chatting with Doro about our intentions. um, and then we go up and start talking to her. Ink asks us to let her know how it goes. Ink. Anyway, we meet up with Doro. She has a quasi-dead nihilister, and she just like chucks her on the ground. She's like, "There you go." We talk about why she's doing what she's doing here, and she mentions that she was invited by I always fuck up this guy's name. Barungum. Enoch connects us to him, and they talk about getting over to where he's at, that he'll send somebody. But Doro's like, no, I want to walk over there. And so ACPU, Pulley, and Miranda are like, hey, we'll walk with you. We talk about how sharp Pulley is, and recognizing that since she is like property of the central government, if Doro like tries to fuck around or anything, it's going to cause the whole ire of the central government on her. So her and Miranda going with her is going to be the best thing to kind of keep her in line without, it's like negotiating with like the AW or whatever. So now what? So now we need to find Exotic because they are clearly involved with all this crazy nonsense. So Enoch can't find them. So how about Sayun? Sayun's over at Missless with the three other CEOs. Rappy sends him a video that we watched about everything we saw in the last episode or last chapter, and then Sayun immediately wants to blow off Exotic's heads. Because we headed over there. Okay, so we send the videos, we head over there, we talk to him. Sayun immediately wants to blow off Exotic heads. We grab her phone, argue with about it. Ingrid agrees with us, and the Mustang is like, oh, Sherry, let me see your phone. And then he crushes it, and she's like, what are you doing? He's like, we're not going to do that. That's ridiculous. We don't want Outer Rim to take the blame for all this stuff. We got to figure out what's really going on and if there's anything else we're missing. Because the central government's going to blame the Outer Rim, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. And you already have Dobin being an asshole, and so he's going to kill everybody in there. So we got to get Exotic. We got to get him over here so they can take the blame. So then we plan what we're going to do next. And so we're going to search for Exotic with backup from Extrinsic in the outer rim, which I know is going to be kind of confusing. So Exotic is Crow, Viper, and Jackal, while Extrinsic is Maiden and Guillotine. All right, so meanwhile, the Queens will interfere with Dobin's plans. So after we all head off to kind of take care of our own business, Sayun is like super pissed. She summons Mihara and Uni and gets Mihara's phone, and then she tries to detonate Exotic with it, but nothing happens because the Missless network is down. And then there's something about someone biting into something, so Jackal was clearly here doing some shady business. So she sends Mihara and Uni to go kill Exotic, and then she also takes off their inhibitors so they can do whatever they want. A bit later, as we approach the outer room, we notice that the partition, which is normally closed, is wide open, and everything is super quiet, and we're like, fuck, there must be Raptures. This is confirmed as Morin comes rushing over to ask for help. After we defeat the Raptures with Morin, we follow her to a camp for the Outer Rim people to like hide out in and be safe, and she chats the leader for a bit. We tell him that we're looking for the ones responsible for the trouble so that the Outer Rim gets left alone. And at first he's like, I don't know, and then Morin kind of convinces him. They're like, all right. And at some point he's like, oh yeah, EH is the one, Heavenly Ascension's the fault. And we're like, sure, do you know where the Heavenly Ascension base is? Because in our heads that's probably where Exotic is. So he tells us. So we head over there, and there's like nothing going on inside the Heavenly Ascension base. It's like quiet, but there's a smell of gunpowder, which means that definitely this is a Heavenly Ascension base. And then we start looking around. We have some conversations with Moron along this whole thing about how sad it is for the people living in Outer Rim, and how EH just wanted to help them, and like we don't really understand what she's doing, and there's a lot of misunderstanding, and we're just like, whatever, we just got to get this thing fucking figured out. Rappy also gets super mad, calling her a terrorist and stuff, and Moron insists that she has the wrong idea about EH and Heavenly Ascension generally. Anyway, so as we're searching around, a mass-produced Nikke from under Dobin's command shows up, and then we get a message from Viper. And she points out that the mass-produced Nikkes here are carrying weapons to kill humans, not to kill Raptures, which is shady as fuck. So we mention it, Moron disarms the leader, and then the counters go to disarm the rest. And then we kind of glance over and see there's a crack in the wall, and Viper's like staring at us very wickedly. And so we're like, Viper? And then Rappy runs over right as Viper grabs us and drags us through this thing, so we all plummet down into the darkness. Thank goodness Rappy was there because she saves us from any severe injury. We try to contact Neon and Irons, and then Viper mentions that the communications down here are completely jammed. We then order Rappy to go grab Viper, and then she turns on some fucking flamethrowers that are in the wall, which backs Rappy up. And she teases us and taunts us and says she has traps all over the place, and we got to be careful. If we're not good, then she's going to kill us both. And then she says we need to go see Crow for any answers that we want. So we start to walk. Viper's leading the way. We start using hand signals that Johan taught us to communicate with Rappy, and she's very impressed and turned on as usual. by how much improvement we've made over the last 22 chapters. Anyway, so we talk about the situation. Then Viper is like, "You're being so quiet. What are you doing?" And we're like, "We're checking out your fine ass, duh." And she's like, "Tee hee hee." Then she asks if we hate her for the whole shooting thing and then the terrorist attack, and also what are we going to do if we catch her? And we say we don't know. We'll have to figure it out, but that we want to save her along with all Nikkes, and Viper gets kind of like turned on by that, of course. As we're working along, we've noticed that there's a big power cable on the ground, and we like signal Rappy to start cutting into it, but being very quiet, like not making a big deal out of it, just trying to be sneaky about it. Viper and we start talking with Viper about forgiveness and how we're not going to forgive her, but that if they have good justification for their actions, that might be a whole different story. And as we banter, Rappy's able to cut the power lines so that we can text Ainz and Neon quietly to let them know where we're at. And then right then, Viper turns around and she's like, "Let me see your phone." And we're like, "No." And so she shows us hers. And in it, there's a chat with her and Crow and Jackal, and she threatens to text them. And then we tell her, like, "Go for it. We've already texted the counters. This is going to be a real fun battle we have here." And then Rappy kicks a hole in the wall and points out that the flamethrowers here are not actually effective, right? Which gets confusing here in a second because you'll see why. Because there's no way there's no scorch marks. There's not enough oil for all these flamethrowers. Like, we've been walking quite a ways. Like, maybe there was flamethrowers in that first spot, but after that, it's just like the threat. And then Viper mentions she just wanted to chat, and we say we will when she's apprehended, and then a drone flies over and explodes right by us. And then Rappy is able to like shield us from that and like knock it out of the way so it doesn't do too much damage. And then she calls Viper too dumb to come up with the drone thing, so what's really going on? And at that juncture, Crow and Jackal step out. And then Ainz and Neon pop out. And then they tell us that Morin went to stop any more incursions into the outer rim from like these Nikkes and Dobin. At that point, Crow wants to chat, and we're like, "Hey, it's too late for that." So we order the counters to drop their inhibitors and to start firing. At that point, the counters are trying to beat the shit out of Exotic when Crow summons the flamethrowers to start up again. And the counter's like, "No one cares about your fucking flamethrowers. They're not even close to us." And then Crow points out us, and she mentions that there's only so much oxygen down here, and that the flamethrowers are not only like burning up all the oxygen, that they're heating up this like enclosed sewer-like space, which is causing us a lot of problems because we're human, and which is true. So Neon grabs us, and then she slips something into her pocket, and then passes us over to Viper, so they can take us hostage. They immediately give us an oxygen mask, and then Viper reaches into the pocket and pulls out a tracker and calls out Neon for being bad at her job and whatnot. And then they like drag us off. Meanwhile, I mean, after they leave, the counters are sitting there, and then he mentions like, "All right, let's head back up to this at the outer rim so we can figure out where like Master is," which is what she calls us. And they're like, "Well, they took the tracker. How are we going to do that?" And then she mentions that she also snuck in a smoke grenade that, like, if any pressure gets put against it, then that will, like, set off the smoke grenade, and we can follow the smoke to find... they can follow the smoke to find out where we're at. And they're like, "Oh, you're very sneaky. That's very good." Meanwhile, back at the partition, Moron calls for help from Sakura and Rosanna. They completely blow her off, but say, "Hey, good luck." And then Jin calls and tells her to get out of there because Dobin's coming, and he's pissed. And she's like, "No, I'm going to stand firm and do what I need to do." And they talk about, like, honor and doing the right thing and all that stuff. And then he's like, "Oh, wait a second. Something's going on. I'm getting a lot of chatter. Hold up." Sakura's in the outer rim getting all the people to put down their weapons and act like docile so that there's no excuse for the Central Government to fight them. And then Rosanna is assaulting Dobin, like, directly from other sides. And then taking out a lot of these, like, mass-produced Nikkes and whatnot with Hedonia. And Moron's like, "Why don't these motherfuckers ever tell me anything?" So then we kind of flip it. We bounce back and forth. We get shots of Sakura. She's getting the outer rim civilians laying on their arms, having a lot of conversation with them. And then we see Rosanna beating the shit out of the mass-produced Nikkes. Well, she's not. She's just hanging out with her consigliere. And they're just talking about Dobin and how Dobin is from the outer rim, and he's got a lot of hatred because he feels like he's better than that now, and that he just wants to get rid of the whole thing and, like, forget his past, and how he, like, sold, like, all his friends and family out so that he could, like, get in good with the central government and become, like, a deputy guy. And how he pretty much is a total asshole. Back to Moron. She's holding the partition, and then Dobin shows up, and she's, like, jaw-jacking with him, and she's like, Moron's so hot. Fucking awesome. I love her. Anyway, we head back into the sewers or somewhere else. We're tied to a chair in a room of some sort, and we wake up, and Exotic starts, like... Well, not Exotic. Crow starts, like... bullshitting with us, talking about equality, talking about her plans. We go back and forth about, like, everything she's planned is kind of turned into failure, but this is something she really wants because according to her, she the things she wants. She hasn't really failed because the thing she wants to see the most is how the central government's going to respond. And she has a whole, like, diatribe about how she wants the people, like the humans in the Ark, to see what it's like to actually have to face raptures and the damage they can do and get some real fear in them instead of just, like, watching Nikkes destroy Raptures, like it's a TV show or whatnot. She rants on about some like super other crazy shit like that. She talks about the Nikke human relationships, how there was like the goddess squad and everything was good, and then things are kind of bad, and then reclamation wars, and she talks about the goddess fall and all that stuff. But we don't get it's like she mentions these things, right? She doesn't go into a lot of detail about them. And then she turns to the TV and is like, watch this. And then we flip over, well, not the TV, but meanwhile, Uni and Mahara are like hanging out downtown. And Mahara's like, shouldn't we be in that room looking for exotic? And Uni's like, hold on, I'm looking for something here first. And she sees like a reporter from Tetra Connect, which is like it's like the public access TV or whatever. And then she's like, all right, let's go. And Mahara's like, oh, we're going to rescue them from that rapture over there. And Uni's like, sure, rescue them. A bit later, broadcast comes on, and we hear Uni telling those civilians of the Ark that the Raptures are breaking into the shelters and that they need to escape immediately, and that any orders from the Strong Government need to be ignored because otherwise they're all going to die. And then we head back to us, and we're like, how'd you trick Uni into doing that? And Crow's like, I didn't trick Uni into doing anything. I just saw an opportunity and pointed her in the right direction, which is true. Because she was mad about everything. And when it comes to terms with Mahara and how Mattis and how Sayun treats her Nikkes and, cycle of abuse and all that stuff. She then opens up some curtains. So apparently we're in an apartment in a downtown sector of the Ark, and we see Nikkes just fighting Raptures. And then after the broadcast, we start to see people coming out of the shelters. And as soon as they do, the Raptures all like, And they like turn their heads and start firing on the humans. So the Nikkes, it's like complete pandemonium. Some of the Nikkes go to help. Some of the Nikkes run away. Some of the humans like try to shoot the Raptors with the Nikke guns and like kill themselves and stuff. It's like complete insanity. So we turn to Crow and condemn her and everything she's doing. And she's like, what are you going to do with Exotic? Are you going to forgive us or are you going to condemn us? And we're like, we're going to let the Ark figure it out, you dumb bitch. And then we notice the grenade that's in our pocket. So we start rocking back and forth in our chair, and eventually we fall, crushing it, which lets it blow out. And then it goes out the window, and the Exotic's like, the fuck's that going to do? And then Extrinsic comes blasting in. And then Maiden immediately uses her Kodoma, which is her like speak thing, where she can make commands, and she orders Exotic to stop, and it's like, awesome, saves the day. And they're like, all right, that was too easy, we got this. And then Jackal attacks Maiden, and like, fuck, because apparently her hearing sensors got turned off. So then Jackal and Guillotine start fighting, and then Crow and Viper like wake up from their like stoppage from Maiden, and then they're like, oh, what are you gonna do here? And Guillotine's like, 3 versus 1, it's you guys are fucked. And then Viper and Crow are like, okie dokie, and they just like run off. And they're like, Jackal, you got this, hooray. And then so Jackal and Guillotine kind of start fighting, which is going to be tough because Jackal's the best PvP character in the game. Anyway, Guillotine's like, I got this. Go help those people outside and see if you can calm all that down. So we rush outside and bump into the counters. We order them to split up and just do what we can until the central government can adapt and get people in here. Meanwhile, the fight between Guillotine and Jackal is going hugely in Guillotine's way. She's just like monologuing to herself and being like a crazy, I can't remember what the Japanese term is for somebody who wears an eye patch, thinks they're like 12 years old and a Dark Lord or whatever. But she's like jaw-jacking about all that stuff. Jackal keeps trying to attack her, and she keeps like slapping her hands away or like kicking her feet away and all this stuff. And then finally she's like, all right, enough of this. And she unleashes her like eye magic, which we find out steals the energy from anyone, and like she can like concentrate energy and move it around and stuff. So she's stealing all the energy out of the core of Jackal, which is essentially giving her like a heart attack, so that she's like knocked out completely. After that's taken care of and Jackal's like in custody, Maiden gets up, and then they start talking, and Maiden's like, we're really fucked up this mission, we're gonna get in so much trouble. And Guillotine's like, fuck. Outside, the counters finish clearing up, but then we see a Lord class stumbling up, and he's like making a summoning call to get more Raptures to come, so we have to fight them. After taking care of them, we collapse from exhaustion. We have a little conversation with Diesel. She's with AZX. It's one of those two, which is the big train in the Ark, and they're driving around, picking up people and taking them to the Mistless Healthcare Center to make sure that everyone can be safe, and that she's going to come pick all these guys up. We just gotta hang tight for a little bit. After that, the counters go off to like search and see if there's anybody else, any other Raptures in the area, any other survivors that we can like gather together, getting ready for the train. When Uni just pops up, and we're like, Uni, what's going on? Why did you do what you did? And she's like, I blah blah blah. And she just like says some crazy nonsense and is like, give me Vapis. And we're like, we don't know what you're talking about. And then she like looks like she breaks our leg or something. And then she's like, aha, I got it. Meanwhile, we head back over to the train, and Diesel's making an announcement to everybody on the train about how they're 10 minutes away from this health center. And then we get a shot of Crow, who's hiding out in the crowd. Elsewhere, Poli and Miranda continue to guide Doro. They talk about how Doro just like showed up kind of like coincidentally, and there just happened to be a heretic, and it happened to be the day that like the Ark was under invasion and all this stuff. And Miranda kind of like walks herself into like calling Doro out for like this not being like, she just, because Doro's like, oh, I just stumbled over here and found this place out. And then Miranda essentially by accident and not intentionally is like, you planned this whole thing, didn't you? And then Pulley's like, shut up, Miranda. Sorry, Doro. And Doro's like, no worries. And then she's like, what's that over there? And it's the Goddess of Victory statue. And so so Pulley and Miranda tell her about the statue, and everyone revels in like the Goddess Squad and how some people treat it like very religiously, or there's a lot of respect, and that they keep it clean, and they're all over the ark and stuff. And Doro's getting some like funny thoughts going on. And then she's like, well, does anybody know what happened does anyone talk about what happened? It's like, no, all the records were destroyed and it's all lost. But there was one guy who just to like wander around and just preach about the Goddess Squad and tell the true story and all this stuff. And Dora's like, what happened to him? Or who was it? We don't get a him or her, so who was it? And Pulley's like, I don't know, they disappeared a while ago and we haven't heard anything about them since. Elsewhere, Birmingham waits for Doro, but he's having a conversation with the CEOs. They're catching him up on everything because since Anderson's like still injured, which they talk about, because Birmingham's like, if only Anderson was here, none of this would have happened. And they're like, okay, whatever, what's happening? We gotta fix this problem. And like they just talk about how the compromised communications network, and then like Sayun gets called out for like letting this happen because it was her squad, and how Mistless is gonna have to pay for all this shit, and like people are like stretched thin and everything. And finally Birmingham's like, we'll take care of this later, I gotta meet with the pilgrim who just showed up. And so they all sign off, and he gets ready to meet up with Doro, which ends chapter 23. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and follow up in a couple weeks for chapter 24. All right, bye.